It's recording?
Yeah.
Okay, yep, it's recording. It's just being live streamed. You got it.
Right. Good vach. Okay. I share a story every week. The story I'm going to share with you tonight is a really special story. I want to share it with you the same way that I read it. This story was printed in the Chabad in the issue of this year, Love and Nissen, by Ari Smith. Ari Smith begins, before saying the story, he says a personal thing that happened to him, which I think is a great context to share the story. He says that the Rebbe would give a bracha every year before Yom Kippur to all the students in the Rebbe's yeshiva. The yeshiva students would come. Those who were older students were allowed to come into the Rebbe's blessing, and those who were younger had to wait in a little more distant. They couldn't be in the front. Only the older students were packed in. They would put on his talis over his head, and he would give the bracha, Yivracha Hashem Yishbracha, the customary blessing that you give to your children, because Rebbe said the yeshiva students are his children, and therefore give a blessing to the yeshiva students before Kol Nidre. So Ari Smith said he was so close, he was able to almost see under the Rebbe's talis. And before he had gone into this blessing, the boys outside, the younger boys who weren't allowed to come in, they said, please, before Kol Nidre starts, as soon as the blessing is over, please come out to us and share with us something the Rebbe said. Tell us what the Rebbe said. Okay, no problem. He said, when he went into the blessing, the Rebbe began with the Yirech Hashem Yishmecha, may God bless you and protect you. May God shine his countenance upon you and be kind to you. And then the Rebbe said, the blessings are being said, they're said from the depth of the heart. And when he realized that the Rebbe is saying, I'm giving you a blessing from the depth of my heart, he just melted. He started to cry, and he couldn't hear anything else the Rebbe said. So he came out to the boys outside, like, tell us what the Rebbe say. All he could do was hug them and say, listen, I couldn't hear anything. The Rebbe just told her, all he heard is Rebbe say, I'm giving the blessings from the depth of my heart. They say if something's far from your eyes, it's far from your heart. But the Rebbe is not far from our eyes or far from our hearts. And I want to share with you an unbelievable story that highlights this. There was a wedding 3 months ago on the first day of Adar Rishon. The wedding was attended by a certain Rabbi Weingart. Rabbi Weingart in Israel is in charge of many educational institutions. He helps many students, many institutions, and his name is well known. So he was invited to this wedding because it's a distant relative of his. He's related to the Schwartz family, who invited him to this wedding. And he noticed that at a wedding, there is a couple that escorts the groom and a couple that escorts the bride. And he noticed that the couple that escorted the bride was very old, and he was very surprised. And the man who was escorting the bride was in his 90s, and he couldn't believe it, and he wanted to know what was going on. And so he asked the man, Rabbi Moshe, who escorted the bride, he said, is this your daughter? Or something else? He said, yes, this is my daughter. He said, but I know that the bride is 32 years old. How could she be your daughter? Rabbi Moshe said that he's 97, and he has a story to share with him. Rabbi Moshe was married to his wife 65 years ago. His wife's name is Avigail, and his wife is 12 years younger than him. They were blessed with 5 boys. I know where the saying comes from, but people say if you have 7 boys, you're going to go to heaven. So Rabbi Moshe said it wasn't easy raising 5 boys, He didn't want to have two more boys and go to heaven. He would prefer to have a girl and go in the front door to Gan Eden instead of going through the back door. But it wasn't easy. He and his wife raised their five sons, and his wife expressed more than once how she wished she would have a daughter. But they were happy people. They were blessed with five sons. They were happy. Their son Ben Siang, may Hashem avenge his blood, was a wondrous child. He studied in yeshiva called Mishkan Yaakov in Haifa. And he's a blonde child who always smiled, always happy. And who was 14 years old. He's very idealistic. And somehow, when Israel conquered Yamit, he began a settlement in Yamit. A half year after it was conquered, he was part of those who set up the settlement called Chatzar Adar and the settlement called Ma'oz Yam. He was part of that. He was very, very, very young and 14 years old. That's what he was doing. His whole life was his love for Israel. So when he turned 19 years old, he was a soldier in the Israeli army. He was a tankist. He operated a tank, and his battalion was sent into Lebanon in 1984. On the 27th day of Elul, they were supposed to get information to discover classified information in Lebanon, but unfortunately, Rahman al-Islam, there was a very well-planned terrorist attack that took his life. After Ben Sian was killed, you can imagine the devastations caused to Rabbi Moshe and to his wife Abigail. They couldn't handle the pain, and they felt that this pain they'll never recuperate. And they were sure that how could they possibly recuperate from this? But he said that Moshe said the light in my wife's eyes extinguished completely. There was no chance of hope. 3 years pass. In 1988, he said, Moshe playfully says, it happens to the best of families. One of his sons became a Lubavitcher. One of his sons became a Chabadnik. And his son told him he should come to visit them in New York. And they came to New York. His son wanted that he and his wife should visit the Rebbe. At that time, shortly after, Rebbe Tzimcha Mushka passed away. And so instead of the Rebbe giving out, as Rebbe always gave out dollars on Sunday to tzedakah in the Rebbe's shul in 770, instead the Rebbe gave out the dollars in his home. So he and his wife find themselves in the Rebbe's home, and his wife whispers to the Rebbe that she had 5 children, and one of them was killed in Lebanon, and she can't come to herself, and she wants a bracha for her 4 remaining children. So Rebbe gives her $4. Rebbe says, Avur kol echad me'abanim. This is for each of your sons. And then, big surprise, the Rebbe gives her another $1 and just says, this is for your daughter. They didn't understand. They didn't have a daughter. They wanted a daughter. They wanted a daughter very much. But God decided to give them 5 amazing sons. And their youngest son was born 20 years before. He was then 63. His wife was 51. And they were happy that they had children, but that's all they had. But here they gave her $1. This is for your daughter. So you didn't know what this meant. So one chassid said, the Rebbe means you should adopt. You should adopt a child. But that didn't, one chassid said, did you ever adopt a daughter? Have you ever adopted a daughter? He said, no, we never adopted a daughter. So they turned to the Rebbe's secretary, Rabbi Groner Olashon. They asked the Rebbe's secretary, what does it mean? They ever give $1 for a daughter? So he said, I don't know. She's 51. I don't know. So what should we do with $1? So Rabbi Groner said, maybe the Rebbe means your daughter-in-law. In the Talmud, it says that a daughter-in-law is like a daughter. So they weren't really sure what to do. So he wrote in the $1. By the way, the story is written in Kvar Chabad with the pictures of the father and the mother. It's a real story from the source. They wrote in the $1, this $1 is given to our daughter-in-law because this may be what the Rebbe means when he said this is for the daughter. So they wrote that on the dollar. This we're giving it to you because this may be what the Rebbe means. Okay. Months go by, and they're in terrible pain. This mistake, shalom, the apparent mistake of the Rebbe, didn't make their trip have any. They went to New York hoping to get a change of scenery and refreshed and see their son and see the Rebbe, and it was they didn't recuperate at all. In fact, this mistake of the Rebbe made the whole thing like uncomfortable and weird, and they left with more confused feelings than they came with. So it says in chassidus, it says in the Torah, how the body and the soul are connected to each other. And doctors are discovering this more and more. So his wife started to, because of her grief, started to affect her health. She started to have, I don't know if it's chronic fatigue, but she was very tired all the time, and it affected her health. And so he found himself taking his wife to one doctor after another, went back and forth to various medical facilities. So sometime in Tav Shemem Tes in 1989, a little more than a year after their visit to the Rebbe, his wife again said that she's suffering from pain. And so this time they went to a gynecologist because this was a kind of pain that she was experiencing, a woman's doctor. And the doctor said they should do tests. Miros. So they go back to the doctor. The doctor says, all the tests show that you're fine. There's nothing wrong. But his wife was sad because she says, I'm in terrible pain these last few days. I don't know what you mean everything's fine. It's not fine. The doctor started losing his patience. He says, I don't see any problem. Maybe rest in a few days would help. But his wife was about to leave. Then the doctor said, you know what? Wait another minute. He ran out of the room. He comes back and he gives her a pregnancy test. It's just to be sure. So Avigail looks at him and she's trying to figure out if he's kidding. But he was very serious. She looked at him like he's crazy. She says, tell me, are you out of your mind? I'm already 53 almost. I'm already almost 53. Are you telling me a bad joke? The doctor smiled and he said, listen, the chances are very, very, very small, but you already came here with a unique kind of pain. I suggest to check. I don't think that there's a real chance that you are pregnant. I really don't think so, but it'll only take a minute to preclude that possibility. Please just don't make a big deal, just do it. So Abigail goes out, she does the test. After a little while, she discovers that they're positive. She's expecting. So at that moment, in a split second, all of a sudden, there was a new feeling that they hadn't had felt for years. They felt all of a sudden, they felt alive. And Moshe said, the pain will stay with us until Mashiach comes, Has Shalom. But all of a sudden, they had a new kind of feeling that they hadn't had in a long time. And they, a short while after their visit by the doctor, Abigail said, I know this is the daughter. I know this because this is what the Rebbe gave me. She gave me a bracha for a daughter. This is going to be a daughter. We're foolish. We didn't believe him. He gave us a bracha for a daughter. This is a daughter. But the joy was premature. When they were at the doctor saw how excited and emotional they were. He knew he couldn't have a conversation with them. So he told them to come back. They came back shortly afterwards. And the doctor said, he suggested that they do that they do an abortion because it's a dangerous thing to have for someone of her age, almost 53, to have to consider going through this pregnancy. And therefore he suggested they do an abortion. And she wouldn't hear of it. So they went to another doctor. The second doctor said also she should do an abortion. So went to a third doctor. And the third doctor said as well they should do an abortion. And they were in the seventh heaven. And they had, they didn't want to listen to these doctors. They knew that the Rebbe gave a bracha for a daughter, and she's pregnant at 53, and this is what they need to do. That's their feeling was. But on the other hand, they didn't really think it's correct to continue the pregnancy when all these doctors are telling them not to continue. Their lives are in danger. What should they do? So they decided they're going to travel again to the Rebbe and tell the Rebbe this great news and ask the Rebbe for a blessing that things should work out, despite all the dire predictions of these doctors. So that's what they did. They went again to dollars. His wife again stood in front of the Rebbe, and she said to the Rebbe, thanks to the Rebbe's blessing, she's expecting. And because of her advanced age, the doctors are afraid for her life and telling her there's a clear danger for her and she should not continue the pregnancy. The Rebbe listened, and the Rebbe said, it's better you go to Ezras Nashim, better you go to the women's section of the synagogue and say Tehillim instead of taking your time and going to visit doctors. Go say Tehillim in the Weibishul, go say Tehillim in the women's section on Shul instead of visiting doctors. Much better use of your time. And then they would give her a blessing for Leida Kashura Ubanekel, to have a child in an easy way and a good way. So that's it. They got their tickets paid. They got their money's worth for their tickets, and they did not go for one test the entire pregnancy. So from that moment on, they didn't visit doctors anymore. 9 months later, as Rebbe said, she gave birth, Kashura Banekel, in an easy way, in a good way. And then his wife said, we now have to give the dollar to the original owner, the real owner. So she told her daughter-in-law to give the dollar to her sister-in-law, who is now 2 days old, and she did. And just a few months ago, 3 months ago today, this daughter was named Simcha because of the simcha, because of the joy it brought back to her parents' life after so many years. Mrs. Abigail and Moshe said that this was such a genius blessing of the Rebbe, just because they were so out of touch with life because of their pain. And this blessing just gave them a new lease on life, such happiness. This fifth dollar, the dollar for the daughter, this blessing it wasn't just a blessing for a daughter. It was a blessing for the parents that they should live again. And now this week she turned 32. 3 months ago she turned 32, and she got married. And Baruch Hashem just shows us how the Rebbe's blessings and love is, as it says in Hayom Yom, on the 26th of Shvat. Affection is a spirit of life in the service of Hashem according to chassidus. It is the bond that connects chassidim to each other. It is a bond that connects a chassid to the Rebbe and the Rebbe to the chassid. It is above the limitations of time and space and knows no boundaries. So we have to realize how fortunate we are. Hashem Chalkeinu. How fortunate we are that Hashem has given us a Moshe Rabbeinu, Moshe in our times to guide the Jewish people until Bias Mashiach, until the coming of Mashiach. May you see this happen tonight in this month of Iyar. Ani Hashem Refecha. Iyar is an acronym for the words I am Hashem who heals you. Everyone needs a refuah, the bracha for Gesund, the bracha for children, the bracha for Shidduchim. Should see the brachas this month in the month of bracha for Parnasa. In this month, and the main bracha, Hashem will fill the heart desires of every Jew with coming Mashiach. Take from mamish a good vach and a good chedesh.
Good vach, good chodesh, man. Amazing story. Love it. Crazy good.
If anyone wants, I can send you the article. Unbelievable.
I would love it if you